that these autistic savants really they're showing us that we live in a sea of information. The information is something that surrounds us, and I believe that the brain is actually a means of decoding that information.
Do you feel like they are here to help humanity get out of this dark age that we've been in of wars and destruction and all of these things? Are they here for a deeper reason right now?
Yeah, they will literally spell out, I am here to help evolve humanity. That is the major motivation that many of them have for coming forward.
And a few of these children said, we are light workers. What do you feel that they meant by that?
So many of them, if not all of them, see auras. So they see the biophotons that we emit and the frequency, that they're being emitted at.
Hello, beautiful humans. Before we dive into today's transmission, I wanted to share something very special and meaningful with you. I've been working on something new for the last few months, and I honestly haven't talked about it in public until now. It's been in the making for a while, and I can't really say too much right now, but honestly, it's one of the most important things that I've ever built. This project is designed to take everything that we talk about here to the next level. If you've ever felt that you've been ready for more, if you feel like there's a missing piece to all of this, then this is for you. Shortly, I'm gonna host my first ever live event where I'm gonna reveal what all of this is about. It's free, but you need to sign up. There's a link in the description, or you can scan the QR code on screen right now. It's happening very soon, and I want everyone to be a part of this very sacred moment. This is for us. Enjoy the episode, and I love all of you so much. Dr. Diane Hennacy Powell, welcome on Just Tap In. What are you most excited about right now, globally and in your life?
Well, I would say globally, what I'm most excited about is that I really think that we're seeing an increase in expression of the divine feminine. I'm hearing this from many, many places, and what I mean by divine feminine is basically that nurturing, life-affirming sort of, way of being that is really about the other. Just think of, what a mother is like, in terms of how a mother is towards a child. And we've lived in a world that has been under a very different kind of system for a long time, in which it's been more about conquering nature rather than being with nature, or about battles and being in fighting, as opposed to peace and harmony and love. And I think that what's happening is that more and more people are having these experiences that they say are, visions of the divine feminine. And so I think that so that's something I'm excited about. I'm excited about the tide starting to turn, because I really think that that would be an antidote to a lot of the things that are going on today. On a individual basis, I'm really excited about my research with these autistic kids. They're just amazing. And in my theory that I've been working on for over 20 years, and the possibility here to have this paradigm actually shift sometime within the next year or two. It's a real possibility.
What about your theory in specific is in your worldview and what you're seeing and researching is becoming more truth and something that you can actually say this is going beyond theory and more about something that we can know as humanity, as a new layer of knowledge?
Well, so I'm a definite seeker of truth, and one of the things that I think gives my theory some potential for being accepted is that these autistic savants really are they're showing us that we live in in a sea of information. You know, the information is something that surrounds us, and I believe that the brain is actually a means of decoding that information, you know, similar to how our computers and smartphones tap into the cloud and are able to take information out of, you know, light signals, you know, or electrical signals. You know, all information is encoded in, you know, sound and in um, you know, and in waveforms and electromagnetism. And so I think that that's true in the natural world as well, not just in our electronic devices. And that the fact that these autistic individuals can access information that we don't really understand. How do they access the information? I mean, how are they getting the information from someone else's mind? Or how is it that they can do advanced mathematics and they never been taught any arithmetic, and they just get the answer. It's not even something that they calculate. I mean, how is that possible? And to me, it really suggests that we are surrounded by information, and that some individuals have just you know, wider bandwidth or whatever, that they're able to tap into it.
Hmm. If we go back to the 1980s, 1 in 1,000 people were diagnosed as autistic or on the spectrum. Now it's 1 in 30. That's a huge leap. And why do you feel that this is becoming more prevalent in our society? What is that trying to tell us about where we're evolving to?
Well, the numbers have jumped even more than that. I mean, it was back in the 80s when I first started studying it, it was more like 2 or 3 out of 10,000, and now it's 1 out of 30. And that's 1 out of 30 if you're including both boys and girls, and it's more like 1 in 20 if you're just looking at boys. So, so the numbers are very high. It's really it's a combination of many, many, many factors. So I think that if you go back to the 1980s, autism was such a rare diagnosis that I'm sure that there were some who were individuals who were missed. I'm sure that because I mean, there's individuals today who are adults that have gone to see somebody after having their own kid, let's say, diagnosed, and they're like, you know, well, you know, there's certain things about, you know, that diagnosis that resonate with me as well, and then they get diagnosed. So I think that some of it is greater recognition, but I think that only accounts for a small percentage. Then that, and some of it is that I think it's now being overdiagnosed. Some of these children are, they stop speaking and they sort of retreat into themselves, not because of, a neurodevelopmental disorder in the way that we think of autism. It's more that they are, their body is just very, very inflamed, and they don't feel well. I mean, just like how, you know, anybody is if they, you know, say you have the flu and you don't feel well. I mean, you're not terribly social. And if you develop a condition like that chronically, you know, just you know, have a lot of inflammation in your body and you're sickly, then and you develop that when you're so young that you didn't really develop that much language, you know, or it affected your ability of your nervous system to develop the speech muscles at that time. Then and the coordination and et cetera, then it's not really the same thing as autism, but it can look like that. So I think there's some that are getting overdiagnosed. And then there's everything from people being or sort of mating is something where you have more and more individuals that meet one another that are very similar to one another, that in the past, when we didn't live in such a mobile society, or we didn't have internet dating or whatever, people who were very similar didn't find each other. And so you also have sort of certain traits that like being, really super geeky smart at science. Well, now you can have, a man and a woman who are both studying science and have a child together. Whereas you go back in history, and there was more likely people to marry somebody that they went to high school with, or that lived in their community. So that's part of it, and then part of it is that we just have so many chemicals and electromagnetic frequencies that we're being exposed to during the time that we're in utero and after birth, when the brain is undergoing tremendous changes. I mean, we're born with more uh, more brain cells than we actually, need, and we have more connections in the beginning than we need, and there's a lot of redundancy built in. And so what's happening during the first several years of life is that the brain's actually literally being sculpted, and we're responding to whatever's presented to us in our environment and really shaping the way that the brain develops as a result. And you can see how the environment today that babies and toddlers and young school children are being raised in is very, very different from the environment, for example, when I was growing up. And we're living in this informational age, and we're living in an age in which children are being given devices at very young ages, and people are spending more time with their computers and looking at their phone than they do, with each other in person. And all of those things have consequences on development. So I'd say it's all of these factors. And one of the problem is, though, it it's hard to tease them all apart, because a lot of these things changed at the same time. Um, and no two autistic individuals are the same.
Hmm. And you've been studying specifically the grouping of autistic children that are nonverbal or no speech. And we've, through technology, been able to give them a voice. And a little bit later in the conversation, we'll get into what they're actually saying about this phenomena and reading minds and telepathy. But first, I wanted to ask you, when did you realize that there was a spiritual aspect to all of this research and things that you were looking into?
Boy, that's a difficult question to answer, because, I mean, on the one hand, I realized how consciousness relates to spiritual traditions before I started actually doing this research. So, I mean, so one answer to that question would be that, I mean, it's been at least 30 years. When I learned that, for example, that a lot of the statements that were made by physicists early in the 20th century, a lot of those statements were things that really went hand in hand with what Hindu mystics were saying. That there were several different physicists who started meeting with mystics like Krishnamurti because they realize that what you say that you know from your more intuitive way of knowing, or or the oral tradition that was passed down to you, but then also that you actually live it, you experience it. What you're saying is the nature of reality, is actually what our mathematics is leading us to believe as well. And so it was really, when I had that insight, that I realized that that this really is a way in which science and spirituality can actually come back together. I mean, if you go back several hundred years ago, they were not separate from one another. That they were basically, it was. I mean, science comes from the word for knowledge, and and a lot of your ancient spiritual traditions, that especially the ones that I've studied, like the ones of the indigenous people, like the Chumash tribe in Southern California, or looking at the Vedas in India, and what you see is that there's a lot of information there that is actually truth. That a lot of the traditions are their understanding of the natural world or the natural cycles. Um, or they had intuitive knowledge of of consciousness, and in ways that now science is starting to show we're correct. So I'd say, at least 30 years ago. But in terms of my experimental research that I started doing, I'd say that when I went to India, after my book, The ESP Enigma, came out, I was invited to India by this woman who works with savants. And she knew that I had said that I thought that autistic savants would be the most likely to demonstrate ESP if anybody could. And I said that back in 2005. And when she read about my work and loved my book, she wanted me to come over to do a workshop on my book, but she also wanted me to meet these savants. And it was when I was over there that I started to realize how um, deeply spiritual these children are. That a lot of what they are bringing forth as messages are really very, very spiritual in nature, that they really want us to be more loving. They want us to know that we're all interconnected with one another. They want us to be, uh, just aware that we have so much more potential than we think. And, um, but also, I mean, more recently, I'd say within the last, oh, within the last 8 years or so, I've been hearing them talk about seeing spirits, and seeing angels, and seeing God, and seeing Jesus, and wanting to deliver messages from these, what these guides that are there, and so I'd say that added a whole other layer to it.
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine once you're meeting children who are saying that they're receiving these messages and seeing all these things, that must have taken you for a whirlwind of, okay, now what do I do with this information? And before we started recording, I asked you how you were feeling. You're like, I'm doing good, but the state of the world is a little hectic right now, a little chaotic. Do you feel, and because these children that you've worked with are bringing through such tremendous messages of love, harmony, unity, do you feel like they are here to help humanity get out of this dark age that we've been in of wars and destruction and all of these things? Are they here for a deeper reason right now?
I believe so. I mean, that's certainly what they say. Yeah, they will literally spell out, "I am here to help evolve humanity." And so they are on a mission. I mean, that is the major motivation that many of them have for coming forward. And their parents are supporting them in that because it's something that, I mean, for the parents to come forward, I mean, they're taking a risk of how they're gonna be viewed by their community, their church, whatever, but they're coming forward because they really they love their child, and they feel that the message is really important. They're in total harmony with their child that, yes, this has to get out there, and they see how motivated their child is, and how hard their child is working to be able to communicate these things, because it's not easy for them to communicate.
Yeah. There's a few that overlapped, and I'm getting this information from the podcast, the Telepathy Tapes, which you were such a pivotal part and voice into. And a few of these children said, "We are light workers." What do you feel that they meant by that?
Well, that's a term that I've heard from a lot of, quote, new age, new age circles. And so, I mean, I think what some people mean by that is that it's basically literally shedding light where there's darkness. So you're working with light to remove the dark. Once you turn the light on, it's like, oh, not dark anymore. um, so I think that that's part of it. But also so many of them, if not all of them, see auras. So they see the biophotons that we emit, and the frequency, that they're being emitted at. Um, and and then in addition to that, they report seeing light beings. I mean, they report that they see angels, and when I ask them what do the angels look like, they describe them as being either blue or bluish white, um, light beings.
Hmm. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And I would love to go deeper into the experience that you've gone into with these children, in the sense of, you're physically going over there to their house, working with their parents, asking them questions, seeing their behavior. What is one experience of working with one of these beautiful children that really opened your heart and mind wide open? And what's your process in engaging into these experiments and experiences and conversations with them?
Yeah, it's hard to think of any just single one experience, but I would say that it when you see how I'm very I'm a strong empath, and so I kind of live in a place where my heart's, fairly open, pretty easily. Um, and I think it's one of the reasons why I work so well with these children is that when I come in, I'm I come in, and then I just am very observational. I'm just present. I'm not trying to get them to do anything. I'm really trying to just understand what's it like to be you. And they really respond well to that, but what they don't respond well to is if somebody comes in and says, "Okay, let's do this. Can you sit over there?" and da da da, instead I just come in, and it's very similar to, I used to do a lot of observation of wildlife. And when you go someplace where there's, birds or, other wildlife, and you want to get close to them, and you don't want to scare them away. You just kind of enter in, and You just have a sense of, not encroaching upon their space and creating space. So that's how I do that. And they respond extremely well to that because they're very, very sensitive to people's energies. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of like how you start off your podcast. You started off with a prayer and this music, and it sort of sets a certain space, and that's the kind of space that these children do best in. And you realize very quickly from the kinds of things that they communicate that it's that what a lot of what they're saying is very sacred. And 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 when you see how they when you hear the stories of how they've been treated, it breaks your heart. How they've been misjudged. And the obstacles that the parents are up against trying to get their kid to have an education. And so, yeah, and people that don't accept their spelling on a letterboard as a form of communication. And then you see how they struggle and they get dysregulated very easily. And so um so when I enter into that space, it's very much, I mean, I'm a healer, I'm a clinician, I'm somebody that really wants to connect with them, and we form a connection very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. I mean, the parents are oftentimes and teachers are oftentimes really surprised at how the child responds to me because they're like, "And then my child doesn't respond that way normally to people." And, um and and then what's interesting to me is when they will sometimes say something to me. Like, I had one of them do a reading on me the other day. I
About what?
I didn't ask for that. Just like, okay, you're getting some
What
information.
type of reading?
Um, well, his mother was telling me um, that he was really good at reading uh, like if they had an ancestor or loved one who showed up who had, left their body and was on the other side of the veil or whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
That, this that her son was really, really gifted at this. And I said, well, that's really, really interesting. Um, I said, well, I said, can he see, anybody around me? And she said, "Yeah," he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "It's kind of confusing because there's so many have shown up." I'm like, "Okay, well, that's interesting." And then he said, "Your half aunt is here," and he described her as tall and dark haired, and I thought that's very interesting because I mean, a half aunt, not everybody has a half aunt. Okay, it just so happens that my father did have a half sister. And I had never met
Spot
her.
on.
She died of cancer before I found out that my dad had a half sister because um and so my father was not happy about the fact that his parents were divorced and his father went on and had another family, and so he just never introduced us to that side of the family. And so for her to show up, I thought, well, that's really interesting. And then he said, and, a grandparent by married, named Harold. And my grandmother, whose husband, left and he remarried and had my half aunt, okay, with another woman, um, she remarried, and that was my step grandfather, and his name was Harold.
Hmm.
And that, and I was like, "Wow, that's like 2 for 2." And those are
Spot
not the
on.
people that I would have expected to show up necessarily. I would have thought it'd be, my mother or my father or, but that's who showed up, and I thought, so yeah, they continually surprise me.
I mean, essentially, we're speaking about non-verbal children and autistic children, and you were doing this motion with your hand, and you mentioned the word letterboard. How has new technology allowed us to actually understand and give a voice to these children with these abilities? And where do you feel technology might evolve into where we can just have a two-way dialogue? You know, there was some teachers mentioned in the telepathy tapes that were having telepathic communication with their students that showed these abilities. So how has technology allowed us to create that connection and understand where they're coming from?
Well, technology hasn't just helped the non-speakers. So, I want to tell a story about when I first heard Donna Williamson speak. It was one of those moments. This was about, oh gosh, 30 years ago or so. And I was driving my car on my way to the store, and I sat in the parking lot to listen to the interview because I was so riveted, okay, on NPR with this woman named Donna Williamson, who was somebody who had written a diary and had sent it to her to a psychiatrist and said, what's wrong with me? And he contacted her back and said, "You're autistic." And and it was the first time that somebody with autism had expressed themselves. And so this was somebody who, I mean, was independently typing into a computer. I mean, she was not, she didn't have the same problems that a lot of the non-speakers have. Okay. But what she described in the interview that I found fascinating was that when the interviewer would ask her a question, in order to answer it, she had to type into the computer and then read her answer. So so what that suggested to me as a neuropsychiatrist is that it's like she's missing that, like, think of it as like a cable, okay? That transfers the information from, this device to that device, okay? I'm missing that cable. Okay, well, I'm going to use a workaround and
Mm-hmm.
right? And so for her it was like the computer she couldn't within her own brain go from hearing the question and having the thought and answering it. She needed the computer to translate. It was like her fingers could express what she was thinking. Her mouth
Yeah.
couldn't. Her mouth could
Mm.
express what she read, but not what she was thinking. If you
Mm.
understand what I'm saying. Those that and that's it gives you it speaks volumes about the brain, because a lot of people don't who aren't neuropsychiatrists don't realize that there are a lot of these sort of syndromes within neuropsychiatry that teach us a lot about how the brain is wired that are just like this. It's some, quirk in nature where this person can, like there's, Oliver Sacks wrote about these kinds of people who, like other, I can give you all kinds of examples from within neuropsychiatry that are fascinating. But anyway, but I listened to that and I thought, wow, isn't that wonderful that this computer has now given her an ability to have a conversation with someone. Uh, and, um, and so then when, fast forward, by about 15 years, and when I first heard about spelling to communicate or a rapid prompting method, um, which is a very simple technology, because all it is you just have either a stencil or a board that has the alphabet on it, and it's in alphabetical order. and you teach the child that uh, to point to the letters to spell what it is they want to communicate. And the reason why it was such a breakthrough for them is that their problem isn't in the part of the brain that's involved in understanding language. They understand language just fine. They can read just fine. Their problem is in the expression of language. And so they need help with that. And there's different reasons why they could have a problem with expressing language. I mean, for many of them, it's that they don't have a very good proprioceptive system, and so they don't know where, you have to know exactly where your tongue is in your mouth when you're speaking. Um, and if that neural connection is missing, then you're not going to be able to speak in a way that people understand you. Similarly, you have to know where your hand is and your fingers and your hand are in space for you to type on a keyboard. But what the letterboard does is it enables them they don't have to know exactly where their finger is. It gives them a large enough letter that they just need to know where their upper arm is.
Hmm.
And so what they do, you'll see when they're typing, is that oftentimes that they know where their arm is, and they sort of know that A is over on this side of the board, okay? And then they can't feel where their finger is, but if their finger is within their visual sight, then they can bring it back in with their eyesight. Now, some of them also have visual impairments, so they struggle with their communication. But the point is that it's like occupational therapy when they go to see these speech therapists, because they're developing the neural pathways to become more and more accurate at pointing. And then once they develop a certain amount of that coordination that's necessary. So with the letterboards, it enables them to basically use their gross upper body skills to maneuver to get to the letter, and so they can spell and communicate. And that is just revolutionary. But unfortunately, there are a lot of people who don't believe that it's really the child's thoughts that are being transmitted, because so many people, when they work with the children on the letterboard, they see that the child is actually typing what they're thinking. And so they think, oh, well, how do I know it's really the child's thoughts? And one of the things that happens is that initially, I mean, and I don't know, I mean, every child is different, but initially, the child does type what the person is thinking. I mean, because that's sort of how they start out. It's like, because the person is wanting them to, okay, I'm thinking, the answer to this question is, cat. And, they want the kid to type cat, it's what they're thinking, and that's the right answer. And so it starts out that way. And then sometimes the child just never gets out of doing it that way. And so the person has to work at, who's doing the facilitation with them, work at saying, no, I don't want you to express what I'm thinking. I want you to express what you're thinking. And so it's a problem, because if a lot of people don't think telepathy is real and they don't think that communication is real, then, I mean, then they never really find out what's going on. If they don't believe the spelling's real, then the child never has an opportunity to have a voice. And if they're afraid for the telepathy, if they notice the telepathy and believe the telepathy is real, but they're afraid for that information to get out there, then it's also problematic, because the child will not be encouraged to start expressing what they think. And So there comes a point at which the children who have people working with them along these lines, where they break free and they're actually able to start communicating their own thoughts. And I can tell the difference between when they're communicating their own thoughts and when they're communicating the facilitator's thoughts. They have a very different syntax.
Mm.
And very different word choice.
That's what I was going to mention, because it seems like when they're speaking, they use a very ancient and poetic language filled with a rich vocabulary. Where do you think that really comes from?
Exactly. I mean, it is really quaint, isn't it? It's kind of, it has this kind of, sort of archaic, kind of quaint quality to it, doesn't it? Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
interview channelers, and the way that I respond or get responses from these channelers is very similar to the style of language and vocabulary that they use. So I just saw very interesting similarities there, of like they're tapping into a field of consciousness, very ancient, that we're just now beginning to learn more about.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I think that, it's and it could also be that they themselves are very old souls.
Hmm.
And this is just how they express themselves. But yeah, it's really, it's curious to me. It's very curious to me. There's a lot of things that I really want to have more time to spend with them and to kind of discover along the way.
Yeah. Has there ever been a question that you asked one of these autistic savants that you're still grappling to understand what the answer that they gave you was really about?
Hmm. Anything that they've told me that I wonder, what does that
Mm-hmm.
mean, you mean?
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, I mean, there's certain things that they describe that they can do, that it's just really kind of, I need to test it out and see if I can demonstrate it in an experiment. Like, so, for example, what one of the girls said that she can bilocate,
Hmm.
and her family says she can bilocate. And I know that in Hinduism, there are these individuals that are these sort of mystics, saints, etc., who reportedly can be be in two locations at the same time, is what's meant by that bilocate. Um, and it's so I really want to understand, how do you do that? And it can be hard to get them to describe certain things. I mean, it's like you can have them go around and around in circles, and because um, and so you have to really be clever at trying to know how to ask the question to get an answer that you can make sense of. But I think that's one of the things that I'm the most fascinated by is, this idea of bilocation.
Hmm. What do you typically ask them when you're working with them?
Oh, I really ask them what they want to share. Okay, it's really more uh, that they're motivated to communicate something, and then I want to know, what is it you want to communicate. So um, I also ask them about what it's like, what their inner experience is like. I mean, I know that a lot of these individuals. Well, I mean, all of the ones who contact me it's because they report being able to read the mind of, somebody, whether it's a parent or a teacher. Um, and I want to know, how do you receive the information? How do you experience this other individual's thoughts? And it's not the same from individual to individual. Some of them say, that they read the thoughts, that this one boy said that it's kind of almost like the cartoons where you have a bubble above your head, and the words are in there.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that, okay? Which
Like a comic
I
book.
found that really like a comic book. I found that really funny. Yeah. Um, but another one says that he literally hears the thoughts. So it's like sort of like, well, I hear my mother's voice. Um, and so I think just like, some of us are auditory learners and some of us are visual learners. I mean, the same is true for them in terms of how they receive the information. And I also want to know about synesthesia. How, do you have the experience of seeing colors around letters or numbers, or do you experience, do you see auras around people? Do you, um, those kinds of things? Because I want to know, because I'm really trying to imagine what it's like to be inside their body and what the world looks like, sounds like, feels like, smells like to them.
Hmm.
And because if you think about how the brain works, and the sensory system works, we take in all of these different we take in information from all of these separate sensory organs. We take in visual information with our eyes, we take in tactile information from our skin, and we take in sound information from our ears, but we can also pick up sound from bone conduction. You can hear sound if, like if you took a tuning fork and put it on your jaw, it would transmit the sound. Um, but anyway, we experience all of these different sensory components of an experience separately through separate organs. And then what the brain does is the brain acts like a computer to create the multisensory, th- you know, holographic experience. And so what happens with synesthesia is that there's different kind of blending of all of those different sensory systems such that it's not blended in the same way that it is for you or I.
Hmm.
And so I always want to kind of get a sense of that. Yeah, um and then I asked them questions about a couple it just varies with the individual. Like as I said the other day, asking that boy, if can you do a reading on me? I mean, you see anybody here? And but, oh yeah. So it's that kind of thing.
Yeah. One of the topics that was tackled also on the telepathy tapes was the loneliness that these children feel because of how society and the old paradigms don't cannot fit their capacities and their abilities into modern society. And one thing that we discovered was that they are, in a sense, feeling that loneliness, but they've found a way to communicate and meet up with each other in something called the Hill. What can you tell us about what you've realized that place is where these telepathic children meet with each other?
Well, the hill is not it's not a physical place. I mean, it's a non-physical reality where they meet, and they describe it as a really fun place. They describe it kind of like almost like a party, but it also has a library, so it's a learning place. They say it's heavily guarded by angels, very tall angels. And they go there and they meet with one another and teach each other things. They get downloads of information. Um, and so I think it is similar to what, I mean, Edgar Casey described as the Akashic records. I mean, they go to some non-physical place that is really the source of all information from the past, present, and future.
Hmm. It also just begs the question, something that I was wondering about of was this space, non-physical space, created because of the need for them to connect, or has that space always just been there from the primordial field of consciousness and they're just tapping into it?
Yeah, I suspect that that space has always been there. I mean, it's really interesting because um, when when I first heard about something like the hill, it actually wasn't from one of these non-speakers. The person didn't call it the hill, but they described to me how they had this experience, and they knew several other people who've had this experience when they took psychedelics, and that they would find themselves in a place where it's just all it's like it imagine there being like this big bubble, okay, that you can poke your head in. And when you poke your head in, a sphere, you poke your head in and you see that the whole sphere has heads that are poking in, looking around, going, "Oh wow, other people here too." Um, and so it reminded me of that, that if you reach a certain state of consciousness, if you're able to achieve that state of consciousness, that it's like a singularity. Yeah, yeah, that you and I think that's one of the reasons why they call it the hill. It's like the top. Okay. It's like, oh, okay. It's the top where you get a 360-degree angle view.
Hmm.
You go to the top of the mountain, you can look all the way around you. You can see all that was hidden before because you've got that perspective from up at the top. And I think that that's why they call it the hill. And it really is that you reach such a high level of consciousness that you're connecting with other people who simultaneously are having that level of consciousness as well. And with these autists, they can like this. Oh, they can be there.
Mm.
It's not a struggle for them. For some individuals, it's that they have to take some LSD. And so that's what I think. It's not really a place as much as you know um, a state.
Mm. And I do remember that one example of the boy who wanted to go to the hill but had to go into his room and put pillows around him so he could find a quiet space free of any anxiety, because it seems like that anxiety severs that connection to go to that place. And what does that tell us about how humanity is regulating our nervous system to the point where we can't access these higher states of awareness, and what can we do in the future to join them on the hill?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you raise a very good point because uh, being in a calm state is really very conducive to, these higher levels of consciousness. I mean, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people will learn how to meditate. And for these individuals with autism, I mean, they get dysregulated so easily. And so fear, that fight or flight response, is very, very toxic. It basically it's just it's very um it's not conducive. I mean, when you're in that state, you can sometimes, if you've got a lot of adrenaline, you can sometimes have, sort of an expanded awareness and have time like dilate. But it's a very different type of expansion from the kind of expansion that you have when you go into unity consciousness and you're coming from a place of love. It has it's just a very, very different result. And I think one of the things that's concerning is that I mean, it's hard to be feeling fear and love at the same time, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're mutually incompatible.
Yeah.
And if you're really feeling love, it's harder to feel fear.
It's almost
And
like go ahead.
so what's happened is that we live in this modern era where we're always, I mean, we always have access to the news. We always have access to information 24/7. And a lot of the what's put in the news and what's, in our television shows and media in general is fear mongering. And the reason why, in part, is because, yeah, there's a lot of, there's a lot of scary things going on in the world. There's also a lot of beautiful things going on in the world as well. But the scary stuff gets more eyeballs. It gets more viewership, because if you have people that are like in a state of, oh my God, what's happening now? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, then you can easily create clickbait for them, because it's like, latest update on the, the Middle East war, are we going to get nuked tomorrow? Whatever, and people are like, oh my God, and they're clicking, and that's how you can reliably keep, it's like the rat in a cage, that will keep hitting the lever. They understand what motivates people. And then, of course, the more eyeballs you have watching something, then the more advertising they can sell. And so there's a monetary incentive to get as many people as possible watching your channel. And if fear is what gets the biggest viewership, then people are going to get more and more more and more stuff that's put in front of them that can make you feel afraid, especially since with videos, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they can show you all kinds of stuff. It's like, oh my God, that's really scary, and so I think that what's happened is that we're at this really crucial cross, roads right now, where we have people who, on the one hand, it's because things, there's so many things that people are concerned about. It's creating an opening where people want alternatives. They want something to happen. And I think that's what some of the excitement about the telepathy tapes is, that kind of paradigm shift that really empowers the individual and has implications for what we pay attention to.
Hmm.
Um, and yet at the same time, the people that don't have that response, who just then go into escapism and drink more or consume more food, or just whatever the addiction is, um, that's not good either. That's not good. It's so that's part of why I'm so passionate about what I do, is that that I'm wanting people to get out of that, I need to escape, and be, less locked into the fear cycle and more into what can I manifest? Because if what you're doing is you're spending your so much of your attention, your consciousness, focusing on what's negative in the world, that has consequences as well. It we what we pay attention to gives it energy, for, lack of a, better word. What we pay attention to enables it to grow. Okay. And that's true on a metaphysical basis, but it's also true just in a practical, like I said, the viewership. If what happened was everybody said, I'm not going to watch that, that just makes you feel, you know, horrible. I want to watch this thing that makes me feel good because it's all about love and blah, blah, blah. If you all of a sudden you saw all of the numbers rising for that, we'd get more programming like that. And guess what? If we had more people watching programming like that, people would be in better moods and things, and it could be transformative for society just to have people shift what their attention's on and go, this is not really serving me. I'm going to step back a little bit and look at what effect is this having on my body? What effect is this having on my consciousness? Is this putting me in a place that I want to be? Is this making me a better, father or husband or, son or, is it, what is this doing to me? What do I have control over? What do I really want to give my attention to? And I think that's kind of me getting on the soapbox there, but I really truly believe that, that it's a message that people have to really think about. And you asked me a question that really, I think that's my answer.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And when we look at the co-creation that is going on over here, we're talking about news in the sense of where is consciousness evolving to? Oh, now there are children with savant capacities, extraordinary abilities, can read the minds of their parents, merge consciousness with other people, meet in a space called the Hill. That's the news that I would want to be tapping into. And I'm wondering, in your perspective, how does knowing this information bring hope and inspiration to humanity, where we're going? Do you feel like this is going to be something that is more commonplace in people? Are we going to be communicating differently? Let's just say, what do you want people to feel when they listen to all that we've been talking about in the last, whatever hour or so?
Well, yeah, I mean, what's been really, really rewarding for me is that when I go out and speak at conferences and people come up to me, how many people have said your work is changing lives? I mean, it's really having a profound effect on people. It really is helping to bring about a spiritual awakening in many, many people. I mean, so many people have reported that they broke down, cried on at multiple occasions while listening to the podcast. I've had people who witnessed one of my experiments break into tears because it's like, oh my God. Okay. It's like this changes everything. And there's this huge outpouring of emotions that people experience that, that are, I mean, there's um, compassion for these kids. There's, there's gratitude. There's curiosity. There's sadness that, their lives have been what they've been. There's all of these emotions that come up that it's really very cleansing for people because, we get bombarded with this kind of stuff in most media that people just become numb. They really just start walking through their life, but one foot in front of the other. Okay, gotta do this, gotta do that. There's a certain numbness there. It's a protective mechanism because you can only have so much thrown your way. And how do you still go about, your life? And so there's a numbness people have. And then when they when they hear, these stories and when they witness these things, people can feel it breaks them open and they feel again. And you feel more alive, you see, because it's our feelings that make us feel alive. It's not our thoughts are just, you know, a lot of that is just noise, a lot of it is repetitive. How many times have I had that thought before? Is that really original? Is it really like a thought I need to have that, really helps me get further along to where I want to be? No, a lot of what people's thoughts are is it's just this kind of garbage. Okay. It could be self-criticism, it could be this, it could be that, and replaying conversations, and it just really is not helpful. But when you feel something, you feel alive, and then you feel more like you want to be more engaged in life. And so I think that, and some people, I mean, the films that they go to that film to feel feelings because it's safer to feel the feelings in response to a film because it's just the film.
Hmm.
And then they go back into life and they're still numb. Okay. But what's happening with my research and people finding out about it and the messages these kids have is that this feeling isn't just they're feeling it because it's entertainment that's like, manipulating them into, identifying with the character and feeling this or that. They're feeling it because of the implications that it has for how they even make sense of the world. The feelings are much more impactful because it's like, people have these reactions of like, I sort of knew this stuff was real, but it's like, or they realize what's important, or they're at least going to be on a journey to find out what's, now in search of answers or whatever. But it puts them into a space that if we have this happening with all of, I know that the people who've reported this to me are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the people for whom this has been the case. And so what we're doing is we're creating a wave of people waking up to the fact that reality is not what we have been taught to believe that it is. And it is far more interesting and magical than people imagined. And then people can connect with people more. When you're more alive, you're more relatable. You're more connected to everything when you're feeling more alive. But when you're shut down, you're really disconnected.
Yeah. You know why I feel it's so important that you just said all that you said is taking that space to acknowledge how your work is impacting lives and is changing the world. And the fact that we get to hear it from you, that's even more special. And another thing that I was thinking about of how else it's changing individual lives is if I knew that you were reading my thoughts right now, I wouldn't be as careless with my thoughts than we normally are. I'd be very intentional, precise. I'd only want to think good thoughts because I know that that's going to affect you. It's like these children that grew up in traumatic households that could read the thoughts of their parents, their alcoholic father, and they're just absorbing all of that because that's like, we're not as separate as we believe to be. There's another thing that I wanted to mention, which is a big mission of that podcast, the Telepathy Tapes, was to give these children a voice and give these people a voice. And I compiled some of the things that in the very last episode, the children actually directly said messages to the audience. That's episode 10. And I would love to just reflect on some of those that came through because they're deeper than what I've ever heard from any psychic channeler. Like, these are real messages that I wanted to bring through. And the first one I wanted to bring was Anthony. He says, I am a futuristic human being. I came into this world with my eyes wide open. I'm a pure, transparent soul here to help humanity evolve. I remember what
Mm,
most people have forgotten. I am in tune with
mm,
vibrational frequencies. This ability allows me to communicate interdimensionally. And lastly, I belong to the energy group of non speaking souls working between dimensions. I'm just going to lay it all out there. And what would your reflection on that be?
my reflection on that? Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, they report themselves as, sort of being, coming into different dimensions, then, I mean, most of us experience the 3 dimensions of space and then, and time as just a half dimension, because we don't really experience it as something we can travel back and forth in. Yeah, and so, these individuals are experiencing more of a, like a 5-dimensional, 7-dimensional, maybe even more dimensional reality, from the way that they describe it. And um, I have no reason to believe that, I mean, that's one of the theories for how psychic abilities is possible, that it really can be explained by there being more dimensions than we perceive. And, in physics, we have theories, there are multiple versions of string theory, but, what they share in common is all saying that we have many more dimensions than what we are able to experience. And so I think that because these children are not, um, they're not as integrated into their body, and they don't buy into the body itself, and so they spend a lot of time in these out of body experiences. And once we're not in body, then I think a lot of the things that, the locality of space and time is meaningless when you're
Yeah.
not in your body. I think that's one of the things that they're showing us. And when they say that, and he says that he's the futurist, human, I mean, I think that um, what's happening is that we are, we're probably going to be moving out of being locked into just this three-dimensional reality. And there's some people who just by, the differences in their brain wiring or whatever, I mean, that they are more naturally just doing that. Then you have other people that are, taking psychedelics that are, inducing these kinds of experiences. And then you have other people that are doing techniques like binaural beats, or or applying the God helmet or whatever. You have all of these people that are interested in trying to expand their consciousness from uh, being locked into just this more limited view. And so I think that is, so this increased interest and attempts to do it in multiple ways is like the precursor to something that we're probably evolving towards. Yeah, and there's suggestion that people have in the UAP community that these more advanced civilizations that are on in other systems, um, that they are more multidimensional than we are, and that's part of how, their craft can show up and then disappear, whatever, that they already are living that kind of more interdimensional existence, and that is kind of a natural evolution for things to be, to move towards. So, I mean, it's an interesting, thing to speculate on, but I mean, that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah. And I'll add on to the speculation, and I don't feel like there's a clear answer to this, but I just wanted to bring it up, is we see evolution as something that's progressive, that, evolution is a progress, that we become more evolved with time. The longer we're here, the longer our species develops. But when Anthony said, I remember what most people have forgotten, that kind of begs the question, has humanity been in that state of consciousness before? Have we communicated telepathically before? Is that part of just something dormant that we have within us that is beginning to wake up right now? Or is it just a progression of how a species evolves? I don't know. I just think it's interesting to look into. Is this something that we've always had, but it's beginning to start waking up, or are we headed in that direction as evolution might state?
Yeah, well, my answer to that really is that I look at it from more than one perspective. So I believe that when we all first come into this world, when we're all born, that we're still connected with unity consciousness. And that what happens is that as we develop and we become socialized and we go through like the separation individuation process, the Piaget's developmental stage, where, that starts happening when we're about a year and a half or so, where we start, really knowing that, I can tell mom no, even if, what she wants me to do is, it's not a problem. It's just like, no, I'm going to say no, because I want that they're testing out that they can actually do something different than, just being, going along with whatever program, mom has. So, and so that's a developmental stage where they start they just have even that concept that I could do something different here. Right. And so I think that what happens with these autists is that their language and development gets disrupted. All of them, regress during that time period between a year and, 2.5 years of age. So they didn't really go through that separation individuation process. And so I think that they never really left that sort of state of shared consciousness. So I think that and it's like that most of us have that we've forgotten. Well, we all, if we could remember our first year of life, okay, then we might remember it. But that's part of, the human amnesia, is that we don't, 99.9% of us don't remember things from before the year of, a year of age. Or if we remember something, it's just like a little flicker of something. And but then I also think that if you go back thousands of years, that a lot of these ancient cultures knew these things. And the Hindu culture is one of the few in which a lot of them have been kept alive. It's just that, it gets treated like by a lot of Westerners as, oh, that, they're primitive, that they, they run around with, not a lot of clothes on, and I mean, there's just all of the, this judgment about the fact that a lot of people in India live, a very, there's a lot of poverty over there, and there's a lot of, and what people call, superstition or whatever. And so it gets labeled as primitive thinking, but when you dig deeper into it, you start to realize, no, there's a lot of wisdom in this. And a lot of how they passed on that knowledge was through stories, through metaphors that aren't meant to be taken literally, but it's a way in which it's easy to remember what some of the underlying principles are if you turn it into a story. So, so in that sense, mankind has forgotten these things. And but I think that a lot of that, uh, that ancient wisdom is coming back.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And another one there is of a non-speaking resident in a care center in England said that we are not under functioning, but ultra functioning, and that the gray matter functions excessively well. And from a neuroscientist perspective, what does she mean that the gray matter is functioning excessively well? That's a different type of operating system in the brain that might allow for these capabilities.
Well, I mean, the gray matter is the neurons. Okay, so the brain has both gray matter and white matter, and so the neurons are they're darker colored. Okay, whereas the white matter, it has all of these lipids or fats, and so it's more of the it's like some of it's the insulation, some of it are the stem cells, that's part of the white matter. Uh, so uh, so when she's saying, the gray matter works excessively well, I mean, it's that, there's nothing wrong with, my neurons. Okay. And I think that they have, they have an interesting cognitive style. They, rather than being linear verbal thinkers, they're more, gestalt thinkers, that visual spatial thinkers, pattern recognizers, that they can process information far more rapidly than the verbal linear means of processing. So they oftentimes can get really bored if you give them just your traditional kind of assignment. They oftentimes want to have more than one thing going on at the same time, and people think, oh, they're not paying attention to anything, and their parents will tell you, no, they're yeah, having the movie going on in the background, in addition to having this homework assignment, a lesson plan being told to them while this other thing is going on. All of that, keeps them, engaged. So it's interesting. I mean, uh, I oftentimes think about, what would it be like to be, inside their, inside them, just experiencing the world, just to do it for a day to see what it's like.
Maybe we'll get to experience it in our lifetime as we evolve into that. But another one, Jack was saying, we are cognitively different. It's a misunderstood gift. The work is not trying to fit into the world as it exists, but trying to make the world change. So you're mentioning how these kids, get really bored really easily with the traditional systems that we've set up. How do you feel as an outlook to the future of our systems? How would they need to change to start fitting, not even fitting, but involving people of this nature into larger aspects of society, and really leveraging those gifts to serve? And because they want to serve, they say they are light workers. So how do we give them opportunity to do that in this world that we currently have? How would it need to change?
So that's one of my goals. My research is to really understand how we can help them to uh, contribute with whatever it is they want to contribute, and to live as full of lives as possible. I mean, uh, and so I mean, it's clear that that these sort of communication methods need to be more widely adopted. I mean, they need to get accepted, and have people who currently don't think that they're valid, realize that, yeah, no, there is validity to them. It's just that you need to, it takes time, and it's labor intensive, and but it's life changing for the child when that happens. Um, but also seeing if there's other technologies that can be evolved that help with that communication thing, because it's slow for them to communicate using the spelling boards, and so being able to equip them with other kinds of communication. So, for example, you have people like Stephen Hawking, the brilliant physicist, who because of his ALS, he lost his ability to speak, but people knew that he's still an intelligent man. It's that ALS just affects the motor neurons. So they knew, they had presumed that there was an intelligence there, and they came up with, a device that enabled him to communicate. And so, similarly, devices could be developed to help these individuals to communicate. Um, and people just need to be convinced of the competence that's there, because it's more difficult when you have something happen that takes away your motor skills before you've even demonstrated what you could do with them. Um, so, but I also think that the larger picture is that our educational system needs to become less dominant on left hemisphere type exercises. I mean, it's that, I mean, there's so much emphasis on memorizing, regurgitating, and kids are bored. Kids are bored in school. And there isn't enough sort of, how do we develop these right hemisphere skills? I mean, the arts have been reduced. Well, the art and music are ways in which you're developing your brain in ways that you're going to actually be able to have both the intuitive and the analytical sides to it inform one another and be working in concert with one another. So we need to bring back the arts. We need to be doing assessments of children on an individual basis and seeing, you know, um, what is this child's gifts, and yeah, and how do we work with them and not making them feel terrible because their brain is wired differently and therefore they don't fit into the system that's all directed towards just this one type of, left hemisphere, analytical linear thinking. So I mean, you have individuals who have whether it's ADHD or dyslexia or, or some of these other conditions, who actually, I mean, they're very creative and brilliant people, but they have poor self-esteem because they go through the educational system and it makes them feel less than, because in the standardized testing they don't do as well. And so they're also a lost resource that that we need to stop treating them that way. And so I think that now that we have, AI capable of, yeah, we have with the computers and AI, internet and all of that, there should be less emphasis on memorizing. We have information at our fingertips. Why we need to be having children learn how to be more creative and more productive with with information, with materials, with XYZ, rather than just acting as though nothing's changed, and still having an educational system that's like what our educational system has been for the last 20 years. So, because what's happening is a lot of kids, their curiosity gets turned off. They get turned off to learning, and then they get addicted to video games, and they get they're wanting to feel alive too. And there's nothing that makes somebody feel more alive than, as I said, you have to have feelings, but it's feeling your passion, feeling, what is it that I really like to do? okay? If you didn't have to worry about money and how you're gonna get paid, what is it that and you just knew that everything's gonna get taken care of, what would you do? What would you do? Oh, okay. That's what you really like to do. And it doesn't no judgment from, as to whether or not, that's prestigious enough or pays enough or this or that. What is it you like to do? And you help people to find that. And then, well, guess what? People have figured out a way to make money from things they like to do since the beginning of time. And with the technology we have today, it's even easier. People can start their own businesses so much more easily than they could back in the old days when you had to, look in the newspaper and find somebody who's hiring and and everything now is so much more accessible and there's so much more potential. And so helping people to develop their imagination. If you can imagine it, you're halfway there to manifesting it.
Hmm.
But if imagination is not valued, if if things like the arts, which really, use the brain in a different way than just reading does, if all of that is just, disregarded, then you're taking the joy and fun out of life, and you're taking the creativity out of life, and you're limiting our potential to develop better societies, better technology, better everything. So yeah, I think it goes way beyond just the non-speakers. It really it goes to all of us. There needs to be massive reform in our educational system.
Hmm. School beat curiosity out of me, and once I was able to reclaim it and get it back, I wanted to live again. As you said, become alive. And this podcast for me has been a medium where I get to feel alive as I learn about concepts and ideas and things that not only interest me, but I get to serve as well. So, I'm fully on board with what you're saying about we need a reform in the education. And because we've been talking about so many of these telepathic children and you've worked with so many, in what ways would you reverse engineer, I guess we could call that, to see how they were able to tap into that realm and teach telepathy? Is that something that you've looked into, and how we can bring this to non-speakers as well and to the general public, so we don't need the machines to communicate with them, but we can just do it in their form of communication, how they've been doing it since who knows when?
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to go here in a little bit,
Yeah, I got
just
you.
to let you know I really should get going here soon. I have another meeting. But yeah, I mean, I think that telepathy is something that people can develop for sure, and it's something that I think you have to ask yourself, what is it that you're really wanting with the telepathy? I mean, what you're calling telepathy, because what is it it's like, I mean, for the non-speakers, it was a necessity. Okay. That they and they needed to be able to know what's going on. So many of them, what's interesting is that these parents say, I can't hide anything from this kid. This kid even goes into my mental file cabinet, and pulls up stuff that, I'm not even thinking about, and the kid knows it, and so, it's forced them to really, take a look at stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
Authenticity,
interesting.
authenticity and
Yeah,
transparency.
authenticity. Yeah, authenticity. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I think that, it's not just like a cool parlor trick or whatever. Okay. There's lots of, implications of what it means to be able to read somebody else's thoughts. And what I would say is that I think what's more valuable is to learn to connect with your intuition, because what we really need is we need to be able to discern what is truth and what is deception. What is true information, what is misinformation and propaganda. What, is this person being honest with me, or is this person being authentic with me, or are they not? Okay, you don't need to be able to learn how to this is a random 6-digit number, I mean, that's
I
just
don't want to see what
for
my
demo.
mom does when she goes to the grocery store, like.
Right, yeah. So you really don't need to be trying to copy them and learn how to do what it is that they do. Okay, they're just showing you that kind of as a extreme example of what happens. But I think what most people really want is that intuition, so that you can be guided by it, so that you can go, this, yeah, this feels right. This feels right. This feels like it's the right move for me at this time. So that we don't get caught up in the busyness of the mind, the little rodent wheels, turning, churning of these thoughts that aren't productive. But really, just we want to get off the rodent wheel. We want to be able to go, yeah, this is it, and have that clarity. And and that's what I call intuition. But what happens is that we get our intuition messed around with, okay, in society. If you as a little kid, little kids can be pretty intuitive. They blurt out the stuff that parents never wanted anybody to say, like, but mom, why da da da, hey, don't do that, don't say that,
Hmm.
and so it's one of those things where they get, you get it denied as like, you might have, you have an alcoholic father who gets mean when he gets drunk, and, and and you're a little kid, and the parents are like, I'm not drunk, and I know that, and it's just like denying your reality. Okay. And it can be in even the smallest of acts. Okay, where there is like there's some innocence, and like, oh, I can't, the kid can't know that, no, that's not true, kid, and so the point is that then what happens is we stop trusting our intuition, and our intuition is so valuable. Our intuition is what really is there as our guide, that it's that gut, it's that gut instinct, that is protective. It's trying to protect you, but in an abusive, or situation, or when you're getting gaslit, and all of that stuff, then you're like, "Well, I don't know." It's just like, "Come on now." And it's like, this is when, oftentimes friends can be, helpful, is because they can see the obvious that we don't want to see. Okay. But something's gnawing at you inside, and that something's, you got to pay attention to. And if you don't have the friends who feel like they can be straight with you about what they see, and you don't have healthy intuition, you're going to make a lot of choices that are not good choices. So that's what I'd say, is focus on learning how to get in touch with that, and then you'll be best served.
Hmm. Beautifully said. And Dr. Diane, I want to be respectful of your time, and I could keep talking to you forever. I have 1,000 more questions, but I know we'll get the chance to do this again. You're always welcome back. And before that, where would you send people to connect with you, with the wave of the movement that you're leading in many ways, and how people can join in into contributing to your research and what you're creating in the world? Where would you send people to do that?
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, so people should go to my website, drdianehennessy.com. And Hennessy spelled Hennacy. And if you want to order a copy of my book, The ESP Enigma, I'm the only one who has copies of that. So you can order a signed copy through my website. You can sign up for my newsletter. Um, you can contact me saying that if you have a child that you think would be a good, participant in my research, or you have a story you want to share, that'd be great. But you can also, if you wanting to contribute to my research, I'm creating my own nonprofit, the Hennessy Institute, and um, I, have all kinds of neat studies that I'm doing, and so yeah, looking forward to the next chapter.
Hmm. And you can just answer this in one question, but in one sentence. But what is one question you wish every human would ask themselves after hearing this podcast?
Mm. That everybody would ask themselves after listening to this. But I would say it's really, who am I and why am I here? And what is my bliss? What is my passion? I really want people I really want people to figure out what makes them feel most alive. And are you really living the life that you really intend? Or are you just kind of living a default life and going along with something that's been prescribed to you that you're doing, and it's really someone else's agenda? So I really think that I encourage everybody to be in their dharma. I'm in my dharma. Sounds like you're in your dharma.
Yes.
And I want people to ask themselves the questions that they need to ask themselves to figure out what that is for them. Because
Mm.
we all have a reason why we're here.
Yeah.
We're all special. We're all important. We all have a reason why we're here. And your job is to figure out why you're here.
Beautiful things to feel into. And Dr. Diane, thank you so much for being a light, for all the work that you're doing. It's an honor. You're an inspiration. And I hope to keep doing these conversations very, very soon. All the love.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.